what's his name? From
And then hopefully that'll give the guys a chance to get on.
Shelley.
Okay, Dr. Year of Learning.
Right.
Dr. Paul Koningsberg, in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Reuven ben Labish, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nisan Hara. Sorry, this morning. Nisan Ben Fardosa. Paul and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi. Friends of Toby Paris, Saratova bat Yisrael Dov. Friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef. Friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon. Cheryl Sher, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Arav Akiva. Marsha Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel ben Arav Shimon. Friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim. Sharon and Fred Lisker, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Edel Bas Yaakov. A Month of Learning by Ruth Burian, Judy and Edward Boehm, in memory of Ruth and Judy's mother, Hadassah Bas Azriel Zelig for Miriam, and Father Yitzchak ben Yosef for Esther. Jill and Perry Meltzer, in memory of her father, Yaakov ben Yosef. B. Pizer, in memory of her mother, Razel Bat Shammai, and her stepfather, Avram Michael ben Shmuel Halevi. Josh and Carol Sanborn, in memory of his mother, Chiena Bas Aryeh Leib, and his father, Shmuel Aryeh ben Baruch. Mel and Haran Haller, in memory of his mother, Fega Bas Yaakov. A Week of Learning, sponsored by Sandra and Marty Levine, and Brenda and Ed Parver, in memory of Sandra and Brenda's mother, Chaya Hudel Bas Yaakov Leib, and their father, Batzalel ben Avraham Yehuda. The children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Esther Shepatovsky, in memory of Esther Riva Bas HaChazan Batzalel. Sid Paris, in memory of his mother, Judith Bat Tzvi, and his father, Chaim ben Aharon HaKohen. Today is the 22nd, and we do not have any day of learning for today. And so, may Neshama have an Aliyah, Krenka Rafil Velta Yeshira Shema Tzliah, and L'chol B'nai Yisrael, a good Geben Shtiyah.
Right.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Back.
All right.
Let's see, Erwin, and I don't see Zev.
Yeah, well, everyone hops in the car and drives over. Zev has to walk over.
I
Right?
also left a little early because they were running very late.
Yeah. Okay. Remember we said that today that the Gemara in this parak deals with the two themes. The later theme is going to be the details around the offering the lamb itself. The earlier issue is going to be, is there any difference between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni? Okay. And we read that section yesterday from Bamidbar, right, chapter 9, okay, that seemed to imply that it was only the Tameh Mace and the Rachok, okay, were the ones that were exempt, okay, from, for that reason, not really exempt, but they were, let's use the word excused for the moment, okay? if they couldn't do Pesach Rishon, but therefore ultimately expected to do Pesach Sheni. And the implication from that, and that's why I'm using it as a lead into today's Gemara, is that if they long then as they did the Korban on Pesach Sheni, they were Yotzei, and they would not be Chayev Kares. Okay? However, as we go into today's Gemara, we're going to see that there's a three-way machloket, okay, on this issue of what really, in a sense, is the status of Pesach Sheni. You know, is it sort of a fill-in kind of thing? If you can't do it number one, you can get to do it number two. So if that's the attitude, well, then maybe there could be other reasons other than Tmei Meis and Rachok to allow somebody to do their Korban on Pesach Sheni. Let's say, a youngster, okay, who was a minor, and his father did not subscribe him for the group. Now he's become of age in between the two dates. He has to bring his own Korban Pesach on Pesach Sheni. Is that the case, for example? Okay. Or let's say there could be other situations. So what then is the nature? Is what this machloket also going to be a situation, right? Okay. So if we're on Sadi Gimel, Amud Aleph, we're about 6-7 lines down, right, to a bright.
Tanu Rabbanan.
Tanu Rabbanan says,
Tanu Rabbanan.
okay? Elu she'osin et hasheni. These are the ones, okay, who need to do their offering on Pesach Sheni, the 14th of Iyar, okay? Now, it's understandable, okay, that when we said that in the Pasuk that it seemed Tameh, initially we've been explaining that it's Tameh Meis. Maybe, however, it's other conditions, other status of being Tameh. And so the Bright is telling us, Elu she'osin et hasheni, hazavin v'hazavot. Okay, male and women who have had some sort of discharge. Hametzorain v'hametzoraot. Okay. Those who have this skin illness, right? What we sometimes call leprosy, right? Because question is, they need to do the purification, and before they can't even come into the Azara unless they've done the purification, which includes a sprinkling, which includes a korban, things like that. Okay, v'nidot, and the woman that's nida. Okay, uba'ale nidot, and any man that has had relations with a woman while she was nida. V'hayoldot, and those women who give birth, right? Because there's a certain period of time, right, that they have to wait. If they have a male child, if they have a female child. Hashogagin, those who forgot to do it on the 14th of Nisan. Anusin, okay, and those who were due to extenuating circumstances, okay, were not able to do it on the 14th of Nisan. Let's take, the Torah already gave us one example of one who was some distance away, but let's say somebody was in prison, okay? In that case, v'amizidin, and what about those who purposely did not bring it on the 14th of Nisan? V'tamei shahaya b'derech rechoka. And we say, as the Torah told us, one who is tamei, which we understood to be tamei meis, and one who was distant. Im kain lama ne'amar tamei. If that's the case, if this Braita gives us this whole list, why do we need the Torah to have spelled out the word tameh, right? But it didn't tell us which variety of tumah. Lama ne'amar, we're saying, why was it said? The ibai le'me'abad barishon, because if it were possible for that individual to do it on the first, in other words, on the first occasion, the 14th of Nisan, lo shavkinam le, we don't allow them to do so. The implication being any status of tomei would no longer render the person eligible to bring their korban, Pesach. Okay? Now, you remember we saw just above on the same Amud that there was a difference of opinion on this, because we said Rabbi Akiva held one view, that you can't slaughter or sprinkle the blood for somebody who was, let's say, Tamei Sheretz, which is less than Tamei Mace. But the Rav Sheshes was the one who said he didn't hold by that view. Okay. Now, the Gemara continues. Ella rather, im kain, lama ne'amar b'derech rechoka. Why then did it also include in this category somebody who was distant? Lepotro min hakaret. It said to exempt him from kares. Ukeman de amar hutza. And it could therefore, according to the one who said it was acceptable. So the Gemara is now asking, given this list that we just had in the Braita, and remember, what did it include? Zavot, Mitzuraot, Nidot, Yoldot, okay? All being women. Gemara says, Isha b'sheni mi mechayva. Regarding a woman, do we say that on the second occasion she has an obligation to bring it? Maybe one of the differences between first the 14th of Nisan and 14th of Iyar, if I point it that way, is that she only has the obligation on the 14th of Nisan. Okay? Vahatanya. But we have a Braita that teaches as follows. Yechol lo yiyu osin et hasheni ela tamei nefesh. Okay, it might have been thought, it might have been possible that only those who do it on the second occasion is one who is tamei nefesh. In other words, they're tamei in them, their self. Okay, you're going to use it that way. So that would include the zav, the mitzora, the nida, things like that. V'shahaya b'derech rechoka. So that expands, if you will, somewhat the definition of tameh from the Torah, right? Zavi u'mitzoraim u'bole nidot minayin. If that's the case, asks the Gemara, what about males then? Okay, if you say that applies to women, what about men that have a discharge or a lepers or had relations with a nida? On what basis does the Braita include them? Talmud Lomar, therefore the Torah teaches us, ish, right? That it uses the double lashon, okay? Lo kasha, ha Rabbi Yossi, ha Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Shimon. So we have a situation here where, according to the one, okay, women aren't responsible. That would be Rabbi Yossi. According to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, women, let me reverse it. According to Rabbi Yossi, women do have the obligation to bring, even on the second occasion, but according to Rabbi Yossi and according to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, women do not have an obligation to bring on second Pesach. Now we get to another Braita. Tanu Rabbanan, Chayav Karet al Harishon. Okay, remember the pasuk, right? Again, what about the second occasion? V'chayav Karet al Hasheni. And according to this Braita, if one doesn't bring Korban Pesach on the second, one would bring Chayav Karet as well. Now, I might ask at this point, does that mean only if the person didn't do it on the first and then they don't do it on the second? Is that when they're Chayav Karet? What about the person who was Anus, let's say, at the first occasion, and then some reason didn't bring it on the second? Okay. Is it the same thing? So, based on this Braita, Divrei Rebbe. So it was Rebbe's view in this Braita that one could be chayav both for kores on the first if they didn't do it, or chayav kores on the second occasion. Okay. That was the view of Rebbe. Excuse me. Second view, Rabbi Nassan Omer. He says, chayav karet al harishon upatur al hasheni. So he felt, Rabbi Nassan, there is a difference, that one not bringing it on the 14th of Nisan would be punishable by karet, okay, but not on the 14th of Iyar. Now, Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya Omer, he gives a third opinion. Af al harishon eino chayav karet. Okay, even on the first occasion, the 14th of Nisan, he would not be, if he didn't bring his Korban Pesach, not be chayav kores. Why? Elaim came lo asa et hasheni, except if he did not bring it on the second occasion. Okay? So it would seem in a moment as we go into the Gemara that it's necessary to explain what's the difference in these three positions, right? Rebbe claiming you could be chayav karet on both. Rabbi Nassan seems to be implying only on one, and Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya maybe not even on one unless you forget the second one. And the Gemara continues, Va'azdu l'ta'amayu, and each followed his own reasoning. The Tanya, as the Braita continues, Ger shenit gayer bein shnei hapsachim. If you have a non-Jew who converts between the two dates, okay, between 14th of Nisan and 14th of Iyar, v'chein katan shehigdil bein shnei psachim, and likewise a minor who now becomes of age between that time. And let's say, as I said earlier, that perhaps the father did not register him for whatever reason. Okay? Chayav la'asot Pesach Sheni, according to the Braita. In each case, they are, the Gentile and the minor, now becoming appropriate, right, must have the obligation to bring their Pesach offering on the 14th of Iyar. Divrei Rebbe. That's the view of Rebbe. Rabbi Nassan Omer, what does he say? Kol shezakuk l'rishon, zakuk l'sheni. Whoever needs to bring it on the first occasion is likewise has a need to bring it for the second. Kol she'ein zakuk l'rishon, whoever does not have a necessity to bring it on the first, ein zakuk l'sheni, does not have the necessity to bring it on a second. B'mai kemiflage. So what then is the initial machloket between Rebbe and Rebbe Nesson? Rebbe Savar, Sheni Regel Bifnei Atzmohu. Rebbe is of the opinion that Pesach Sheni, the 14th of Iyar, is like its own holiday. Rebbe Nassan Savar Sheni Tashlumin Rishonhu. And Rebbe Nassan's of the opinion that Pesach Sheni, the 14th of Iyar, is a Tashlumim. We're going to call that a redress or a substitute, or maybe even or is it a repair? Okay, but it's a fill-in, a substitute for the first. And therefore, Tikune l'rishon lo matkinan le. Okay, and therefore we might say that any repair for the first, it doesn't necessarily repair it. It's simply a substitute. The Rebbe Chananya ben Akavya Savar, and now we get to a third opinion. Sheni takanta derishonu. Rebbe Chananya holds that Pesach Sheni, the 14th of Iyar, is clearly a means of repairing what one missed on the first occasion. Ushloshtan mikra echad darshu. And the three of them came up with their each perspective, even though, I'm going to say, they were interpreting the same pasuk. Right? What did they do? We're going to see, okay, that what happens is when we read the pasuk, okay, we have the word ki in it, right? And how do they interpret the word ki? Because the word ki has four possibilities. It can mean as normally as in modern Hebrew, because, but there is also the fact that it could mean if, or it could mean lest, or it could even mean but. Right? So let's go on now. The pasuk said, "V'ha'ish asher hu tahor, u'bederech lo haya." If the man was, right, tahor, and he wasn't on the road, Rebbe Savar, then, v'chadal la'asot, ha'pesach v'nichrata. Okay, continuing with that pasuk, that what happens if he refrained from bringing the Pesach, subject to karet, delo avad berishon, that if he didn't do it on the first occasion, inami, if that's the case, also, korban Hashem lo hikriv b'moado. Why? Because then he did not bring Hashem's offering at the appointed time, namely, b'sheni, on the second occasion. Umimai daha chet o yisa karetu. And how do we know then that Rebbe interpreted using, when it says he has to bear his sin, okay, that implies the punishment of karet, right? How do we know that? Kasavar, as we go over to the next daf, right? Migadef, because he makes it similar to the example of the blasphemer. Hainu mevarech Hashem is similar to that of the one who euphemistically blesses Hashem.
Right, we don't say that.
Right. Uktiv, and there it's written, b'mevarech Hashem, with regards to the one who basically blasphemes, v'nasachat o, okay, that he carries he bears his sin, okay? And there we know that that's punishment is karet. V'gamar hai cheto dahacha micheto dahatam. And we learn, therefore, what his sin is here, namely, in our case, okay, micheto dahatam, from what his sin is in that case. Malahalan karet, afkan nami karet. So we're here, it's karet. So we're there, it's karet. Here too, it's karet. Okay. Now let's go on to explain Rabbi Nassan. Rabbi Nassan Savar, he understood the following. What's our, again, citing part of our pasuk? V'chadal la'asot ha'pesach v'nichrata, right? If he refrains from doing the korban pesach and therefore is subject to karet. Dahai ki, that here the word ki means because. Lashon dahahu. It's this kind of language, right? Like because. Vahachi ka'amar rachmana. And this is how the Torah says, means to understand the pasuk. Daha korban Hashem lo hikriv b'moado barishon. Why? Because the offering of Hashem was not offered at its appointed time on the first occasion. Hai cheto yisa, and therefore this phrase of he have to bear his sin. Ma'i avidle, what does Rabbi Nassan do with it? Kasavar migadev. He also has in mind the example of the Megadef, the blasphemer. Lav hainu mevarechet Hashem, but it's not because it's similar to the one who curses Hashem, as we said. V'gamar hai cheto dahatam, and he says that we learn here the idea of the Mivarechet Hashem having to get karet. Mehai cheto, from this example, from our example of the Korban Pesach, dahacha of here, namely mahacha karet, namely where here, in regards to the not bringing Korban Pesach at one's appointed time, is subject to karet, right? Because that would be the punishment clearly on not bringing it on Pesach Rishon, right? Afhatam karet. So there we apply it to karet, to the one who curses Hashem. Now let's get to our third case, right? V'Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya, what is his view? Right? How does he understand the word ki in this case? In the pasuk, v'chadal la'asot ha'pesach v'nichrata. Again, citing the same part of the Pesach, of the pasuk, okay, that he refrains from bringing and doing his offering and results in karet, right? How is he going to understand it, right? In a different way. I korban Hashem lo hikriv b'moado, if, that's how he's going to understand ki, as if he did not bring the offering of Hashem at the appointed time, basheni, then he must bring it on the second occasion. V'hai cheto yisa, and this phrase of that he must bear his sin, what does Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya do with it? Ma yavile kida amran, as we've said, hilkach, and therefore hezid bazeh ubazeh divrei hakol chayav, namely by all three opinions, if one intentionally did not bring his Korban Pesach, everybody would say, absolutely,
He's chayiv.
he's chayav.
Of course.
Shagag bazeh ubazeh, if he forgot on both occasions, what would they say? Divrei hakol patur, he would be exempt. However, our Gemara tells us, Hazid berishon v'shagag b'sheni, if he intentionally did not bring it on the 14th of Nisan and simply forgot on the 14th of Iyar, what happens? The Rabbi Nassan, mechayve. Rebbe would say he is chayav karet because he missed both. Rebbe Nassan would say he's chayav karet. Why? Because he did not use the second occasion as a substitute for the first.
First, right.
Okay. Ula Rebbe Chananya ben Akavya patur. But in that case, Rebbe Chananya ben Akavya would say he would be exempt from karet. What about the following situation? Shagag barishon. Say he forgot on the 14th of Nisan. Vehezid b'sheni. But he intentionally did not bring it on the 14th of Iyar. The Rebbe chayav. Again, according to Rebbe, he missed both occasions.
So he's chayiv.
Therefore, he would be chayav. The Rebbe Nassan, the Rebbe Chananya ben Akavya, patur. In that case, maybe he didn't substitute it, or maybe he didn't use it as a replacement. Nevertheless, okay, he would still not be chayav kares. And that ends that discussion. Okay? Now, remember we just got through pointing out that by the Torah, we really only had two criteria, tameh, and we really didn't define that in detail, except the discussion of the Gemara seemed to tell us at this point there are differences of opinion, whether it's tameh meis or other forms of tumah. So now let's get to look at the second Torah criteria, which was derech rechoka. Okay. So how far away did you have to be, okay, to be considered exempt? Let's put the question that way. Ordinarily, from the pshat, we might have thought, right, considerable distance. Okay? But we're going to add in now in a moment a new criteria. And that criteria is, at what point in the day did they start to offer the Korban Pesach? After midday, right? So do you have to get to Jerusalem at the time that they start offering a Korban Pesach by midday? Or if you're part of a Chabura, do you only have to get there at the time that they offer your Korban Pesach, that you're a part of? Okay? That would be the question. Or maybe I don't even have to get there if they sign me up, okay? Maybe I don't have to get there till it's time to eat it. And I'm still Yotzei and Korban Pesach. Let's see what the Gemara is going to tell us.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I don't see it mentioned, but will they bring up the topic of deliberately being away or accidentally being away?
Good question, Bob. Very good. Let's see if the Gemara mentions that.
Okay.
I'm going to simply add to your question a little bit, because it was a very good question, and say, what happens if you're away on a mitzvah? Does that give you more of a, so to speak, an exemption, as opposed to, let's say, going away to, as a recent politician did to Cancun, right? Okay.
Are you jealous?
No comment. Matt Neaton, what does our Mishnah want to know? Ezohi derech rechoka. How do we define this issue of distance? Okay, so the first example the Mishnah gives is min hamodeim lechutz, from the distance of Modin to Jerusalem. Okay, Koren had a map to show us that it was a sizable distance. Okay, and I'm sure if you were walking it, it would take some time. Okay, and so therefore maybe that's going to be our measure, is how long is it going to take to walk from a distance. Okay, ukamidata lechol ruach, and therefore anywhere else in that same distance, the measure in all directions. Divrei Rebbe Akiva, that's the view of Rebbe Akiva. Rebbe Elazar Omer, mi'iskupat ha'azara ulechutz. Rebbe Eliezer is saying from the threshold of the Beis Hamikdash, okay, from the temple area, okay. Now, if we all remember that we once had, and I think it's maybe in the previous volume, okay, or maybe it's still in this volume. Yeah, if we were to go back to, let's say, 85b3, just for a quick second, okay? All right, we see a map of the temple, a diagram of the temple and the courtyards. Okay? It doesn't seem to tell us whether Rebbe Eliezer says the iskupa at ha'azara, or is he talking about, let's say, from the Nicanor gate? Would that be the area that he's referring to? Or is he referring to the gateway to the women's courtyard? So notice you have a bit of a difference in that distance. In either case, okay, the question he's raising is you have how close to being into the Azara for your presence there for the offering of the Korban, the slaughter of the Pesach offering. Okay? Amar le Rabbi Yossi, and says Rabbi Yossi, Lefichach nikod al hey. Therefore, if we look in the Torah, okay, we'll see a dot over the letter hey in the word derech rechoka, over the hey of rechoka. Lomar, lo mipnei sherachok vadai. It's not because it's actually distant, ela mi'iskupat ha'azara ulechutz, but rather from the, I'm going to use threshold entranceway into the temple precinct proper, going outwards. Now, Mar Ula in the Gemara. Now, Ula, remember, traveled frequently back and forth, Bavel Eretz Yisrael. Okay? So he was familiar with both communities and the locations. And so he says as follows, initially, Min hamodeim liYerushalayim, the distance from Modim to Jerusalem, Chamisha Asar Milin Havya. That was 15 mil. Okay?
It is.
All right? Mil, remember, was a Roman measurement. Okay, right? And so that was the common, that's where, of course, we get miles, but that was like the common measurement. Okay. And if I have a note here that I can read, 4 parsangs was equal to 1 mil. We'll see if we'll need that. Okay. Parsang was the other means, right? Savarla kahad amar. And therefore, it implies that he had the view, like based on the following person, namely Rabba bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, who said the following: Kama mahalecha dam bayom. How far can a person walk in a day? Asara parsaot. He could walk 10 parsangs, which means the average person could walk 40 mil in a day, right? Okay.
Definitely not miles.
What?
Definitely not miles.
And furthermore, he says as follows: Me'alot hashachar v'ad hanetzachama, from dawn to sunrise, to the time the sun comes up, chameshet milim, one should be able to walk 5 mil. Mishkiat hachama v'ad seit hakochavim, from the time that the sun set until the stars come out, chameshet milim, that's another 5 mil. Okay, so that's 5 before, right, the sunrise, and 5 after sunset. So let's deduct those. So deduct that from that distance, right? Okay, so therefore that leaves us a 30 mil, right? Pashula tlatin. Okay, so the Gemara then tells us, deduce, right, 15, right? Why do we do 15? Because we said that they started offering the Korban Pesach midday, right? So that means we're only talking about the fact that the person has to be able to walk from sunrise to midday, 15 mil. Chamisar mitzafra lepalga diyoma. Therefore, 15 from the morning to midday. Okay. Vahamisar mipalga diyoma laorta. And walk 15 mil from half the day, from midday to evening. Okay. Ula latame. Ula, therefore, was referring based on his explanation. De Amar Ula, as Ula said, Ezahu derech rechoka. What then is far distance? Kol she'ein yachol likanes b'sha'at shchita. Anyone who is not able to enter the Azara at the time of the slaughter. So if he's more than 15 mil from the temple, that would be our definition, according to Ula, of derech rechoka. Amar Mar, here the master said, me'alot hashachar ad hanetzachama, from dawn, okay, until sunrise, chamishat milim, minalan, 5 mile. How do we know this? Dichtiv. Why? Because it's written, Ukumo hashachar Allah, ve'itzu hamalachim v'gomer. Pasuk tells us that before, as the sun rose, that's when the angels arrived. Okay, we're talking about the old Sodom story. V'gomer, and then it says, Hashemesh yatsa al haaretz velot bat so'ara. And then else it tells us that the sun came over the earth, and Lot reached Zoar. Va'amar Rabbi Chanina, and Rabbi Chanina tells us, Li didi chazi li hahu atra. He says, I myself saw that location. Vahavya chamisha milim, and the distance from Zoar, from Sodom to Zoar, was 5 mil. So he's saying. So that gives us proof that one should be able to walk that distance, at least biblically, from that time. Namely, Gufa. Let's come back and analyze what he said, says the text. Amar Ula, says Ula, Ezohi hu derech rechoka. What is a distance? Kol she'en yachol likanes b'sha'at shchita. One who is not able to enter the Azara than at the time of slaughter. Rav Yehuda Omar, says Rav Yehuda, Kol she'en yachol likanes b'shat achila. Rabbi Yehuda gives a different definition, that you're not able to enter, let's say, some part of the temple precinct at the time of eating. Amar le Rabba le'ula. And so Rabba therefore says to Ula, L'didach kasha, L'Rav Yehuda kasha. Therefore, that's problematic for you, and it's problematic for Rabbi Yehuda. L'didach kasha. For you, Ula, it's problematic. Da'amart kol she'en yachol likanes b'shat shchita. Because you use the criteria that derech rechoka is a situation where one does not arrive before the time of the slaughter, midday. Vaha, and here, tamei sheretz, one who might be tamei because of contact with an animal, right? De'en yachol likanes b'shat shchita. He's not going to be able to enter at the time of the slaughter. Why? Because remember, he has to go through purification, which means he has to do that before he can even enter the temple area. V'ka'amat shochtin v'zorkin al tamei sheretz. And yet you say that it's acceptable to slaughter and sprinkle the blood for somebody who's tamei sheretz. Rav Yehuda kasha, and for Rav Yehuda it's also a problem. Da'amar, because he says, Kol she'en yachol likanes b'shat achila, one who is not able to enter at the time of eating. Vahat tamei sheretz, and here again you have the example of somebody who is tamei sheretz. De'yachol likanes b'shat achila. That person would be able to would be able to enter the temple precinct by the time one is eating, because that would give them time to be purified. And then after the sun sets, they are no longer tamei, and therefore they could eat at the evening the Korban Pesach. Uka'amar, and yet he says, Ein shochtin v'zorkin al tamei sheretz. And he says you can't slaughter and sprinkle for somebody who's tamei sheretz. Amar le. So Ula responds, Lo lididi kasha. It's not a problem for me. V'lo Rav Yehuda kasha. And it's not a problem for Rav Yehuda. Lididi lo kasha. For me, it's not a problem. Derech rechoka letahor. Because the implication is, when are we talking about a distance? That's for somebody who is tahor. Ve'ein derech rechoka letamei. And there's no issue of derech rechoka for somebody who's tamei, because that's a whole separate category that the Torah has already indicated.
Right.
All right? And Sadi Dalit a little bit on the top, the Rav Yehuda, lo kasha. And for Rav Yehuda also there's no problem. Tamei sheretz rachmana dechia. Regarding somebody who is tamei sheretz, the Torah puts him off. Dichtiv. Why? Because it's written, Ish ish ki yeh tameh lenefesh. Right? Any person is tameh in their person. Milo askinen shechal shvi'i shelo liot be'erech Pesach. Aren't we then dealing with a situation, okay, where his seventh day of Tuma concludes on Erev Pesach? Va'afilu hachi, and even in that case, amar rachmana lidche. Nevertheless, the Torah says he's to be put off. And so therefore, Rav Yehuda would have his answer too. And so that's where we're going to stop today. All right, we'll pick up with a new Braita, okay? Because we're not done with this whole issue of the distance, okay? And we're going to see, okay, if there's any other explanations other than what we've had so far. Okay? So everybody take care, have a good day.